Welcome, everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 28th of September, 2022, and this is the Cluster API project meeting. Cluster API is a sub-project of the Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their guidelines. So what that basically means is please raise your hand if you would like to speak in the meeting, and I'll call on you. And also, please treat others as you would expect to be treated. And just to be explicit about that, please be kind to each other. So with that said, we start off all of our meetings with an opportunity for new attendees to introduce themselves to the group. So if anyone here is new, please feel free to either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hey, hello. I'm kind of new, so my name is Mark Piakota. I'm from GitHub, and I'm planning to introduce Cluster API to my team. So that's why I'm joining this meeting and trying to be involved with the community again. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Mark. It's it's very, very exciting to see someone from GitHub here. I know we all use your infrastructure quite heavily. Welcome. All right, I am not seeing anyone else unmute or hands go up. So we will move on to the next part of the meeting now, which is the open proposals readout. Do we have anyone who would like to speak on any of the proposals that are open now? Please raise your hand. Yes, Guillermo, you're first.
Yeah, as for the CRS reconcile mode, I already got to LGTMs from Fabrizio and Stefan, so thank you for that. I just want to ask on what are the next steps? Do we need more reviews, or do we set a date for lazy consensus, or what should we do?
Vince or Fabrizio, did either of you want to speak to that?
I can speak to that. So recently what we did is that if a proposal has a list of reviewers, first of all, you should ask for approval for these reviewers. In this case, it is an old one, so yeah, I'm not sure if this apply, but at least I will get. I remember you discussing this proposal with some other folks. If I remember, they were from D2IQ. I'm not entirely sure. So first of all, get approval LGTM from them, and then we set a lazy consensus by 1 week. Okay,
I think they already approved, but I'll ask them to add a new one after I squash if that's what's required.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Fabrizio. And Guillermo, I don't know. I didn't see in the comments there. It might be worth adding another comment. Just adding the people if we didn't get an approval in here from them already.
Yeah, I think they approved the PR but didn't add a LGTM. So if that's what's needed, I'll just ping them or tag them in the PR.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jonathan, would you like to speak on one of the proposals?
Yeah, so a quick update from my end. It looks like most of the discussion in the comments is kind of wrapping up, and I wanted to ask what people thought about merging the code behind this proposal into Cappy as part of the experimental API, or hosting it in its own separate provider repo.
Fabrizio, go ahead.
I can express my opinion about this one. Then I want also to talk about another proposal. So first of all, we have to get this proposal merged, and the same applies. So get LGTM for approval and set a deadline. I'm kind of -1 to add this provider to this repo. I think that so ideally, in my opinion, it should be a provider in SIG cluster Lifecycle, but it seems to me that it needs a little bit more of traction before getting there, because basically now it is you are doing a great job. Jack is helping, but before creating a repo, a new project in the SIGs, we should be sure that there is a community, a set of people, a company that is backing it. So I think I don't see problem in merging the proposal. I will encourage people to try this because it is a great idea. But for moving the code in tray or in a separated provider, in my opinion, something more is needed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's still a prototype for now, so I think that makes sense to try to get some more traction and users before we decide where that should go later on.
I guess, does it make any sense to kind of set up, and maybe you already have this, but does it make any sense to set up this provider as its own repo then, and try to really treat it like some of the other provider code in that respect? And then maybe that would make it easier to make a decision in the future about like either bringing the whole repo in or something similar.
Yeah, I just have it in my personal repo for now, but I think I was mostly asking as an eventual direction, would we want to try to get an official SIG repo for it or try to merge it into Cluster API? And you can see that my comment there. It seems like people are curious where this is going to end up eventually.
Got it. Cecile.
I have a question, I guess, for Fabrizio. In terms of getting an official SIG repository for things like this, do you think we can do this like as soon as the proposal is merged and then gradually get the POC or the prototype merged in there? Or do we need to first like keep it in a separate repo? Because right now the prototype lives in Jonathan's org. So I think it'd be good to move it somewhere out of there and also have a possibility to have PR reviews and et cetera. Because right now it's just been merging directly.
I think that we can engage. So as soon as the PR is merged, the proposal is merged, I think we can engage with SIG cluster Lifecycle. If Microsoft is backing these, I think that I don't see problems. Probably other companies are interested as well. So it is just a matter to collect this show of interest and make the case in the SIG cluster side. I also like to add that after last week's discussion on extending the concept of provider, now Cluster Capital is already, I have a PR for supporting a runtime extension and IPAM provider, which are the proposal merged as of today. And following the same track of that PR, it will be quite easy to add support also for a DOM provider in Cluster Capital.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for clarifying. Well, I guess we can get this proposal merged and try to get some more traction from users and other community members.
All right, and I mean, it sounds like maybe, I don't know, Fabrizio, if you have time, maybe leave a comment, or is your comment already in here about kind of minus wanting to bringing this in? Might be worth adding to the issue, or to the pull here.
Honestly, I see this as a orthogonal topic. So the proposal is the proposal, where the code lives is another steps. And this proposal especially is kind of documented the prototype that has been already finished. So let's close this phase and then we start discussing the new one.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Now, did you want to speak on one of these proposals as well, Fabrizio?
Oh, yes. If you remember that there is a proposal which is labeled sync between machine deployment and Kubernetes nodes, which is a long-standing one with a lot of discussion, et cetera, et cetera. In the last week, we had a couple of interaction with Alberto, both in Slack and also on a couple of PRs. And we kind of decided to break down the problem in smaller actionable chunk. And so I took over the proposal and I create one that will tackle only the sync of label between machine and underlying Kubernetes node. There will be another, and so we try to get an agreement and close this step, and Alberto is already prototyping. It already at a PR where it is try to nail down all the programs. In parallel, or as soon as possible, I will start a second proposal that basically deep dive on how to propagate machine from cluster, labels and annotation from cluster class down to machines, and also tackles the problem, the fact that given that we are reconciling labels, we wanted to make our rollout rules a little bit smarter, so we avoid rollouts when the change apply only to Kubernetes object and not to the actual machine. But yeah, it kind of helps splitting out problems that are that can be solved independently, and so I'm going down this path.
All right, that sounds good. And yeah, breaking it up sounds like it might make it a little bit easier to deal with. Did anybody have questions or comments about that? Okay, and I'm not seeing any hands up, so we will move on from the open proposals. Okay, so discussion topics. It looks like I've got the first one, and this is kind of a nice follow-up to what Fabrizio was just talking about, labels. So this is going to be a little sensitive because first I have to kind of issue a little mea culpa here. In scaling from zero, we had taken some prior art that we had been using in OpenShift to do the scaling from zero. And there is some code in there that pulls labels and taints from the machines that it thinks it might be predicting for a scale from zero type event. And I had left code in there that was looking into a different location than one existing cluster API. So to begin with, I'm going to go through and pull that out of the cluster autoscaler implementation because I don't think it should be there. So apologies to the community, that kind of slipped by. On the upside, though, it doesn't negatively affect the cluster API implementation because those fields just won't be found and the autoscaler will continue. But we did have a user asking in the cluster API channel about labels and taints for nodes that will be upcoming. So when we created the initial enhancement for scaling from zero, we purposely did not look at taints and labels because at the time there was no way to easily surface what labels and taints a node might have when it becomes when it comes into the cluster. And so we specifically didn't address that initially. But it seems like that now might be a time to start talking about that as we now have scale from zero in place. And there's a little bit of not prior art, but there are some other efforts going on for similarly related things. So one of the things that's kind of related is this 6255, which I think was also referenced in one of, yeah, this was the one that got closed. But, you know, the idea here being that we would have the labels, and I'm not sure if I can find this real quickly, just looking at it here, but we would have the labels existing in the machine set spec template metadata labels area. And then those would be the labels that would be applied to machines that would come up. So the first question I have for the group is, assuming that we end up, you know, kind of going this path in the end, would that also be a place that we could take them for the autoscaler? And then the next question, which is probably more complex and might, you know, probably will require another type of enhancement, is what should we do about taints? You know, and I added a couple different options here that we could do. We could, document some of the well-known labels and taints to be used. We could take the labels from this specific area. We could add taints on an annotation, although I don't think that's the greatest way to do this. Or we could end up adding more API fields to cover some of these things. So I just wanted to, Stefan has a question in chat here to clarify the labels of new machines or new nodes. These would be the labels that will be associated with any new node that is created. So for example, this came up in reference to taints, I believe, because the user in question was making spot instances. If I remember correctly, they're spot instances, or they had instances that they wanted to create in the cluster that had taints on them when they came in. And the autoscaler will not consider those, it won't consider those taints right now because that functionality isn't present in the cluster API implementation. So workloads that were looking for those taints or are looking for specific labels, like using selector labels, won't be able to work with scaling from 0 because the prediction won't be accurate about what labels and taints would be on those nodes when they appear. Jack, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Well, I think I'm going to ask kind of a dumb question. Do taints come into play from scale to 0 scenarios when the autoscaler detects that there are specific tolerations in the workloads that are pending, and so it tries to correlate those with the correct, say, node pools that have the appropriate taints?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So like the cluster autoscaler uses a copy of the core kube scheduler to do its predictions about where the pods will end up. So yeah, like if you had a specific toleration on your workload, and that, that taint doesn't exist or something, then yeah, the autoscaler will just kind of ignore those pods. And it's the same with labels as well.
Got it. And so cluster and CAPI doesn't have a story for taints on machines.
Correct. And we are just now developing a story about labels on, nodes and machines. We don't have a story about taints. So that, probably if we can, I don't know if there's a way to draft behind what's being proposed, for the labels, right?
There should be. I mean, Fabrizio, what are your thoughts on being able to essentially land a taints proposal that is 90% of what's in the labels proposal? Because there's a ton of overlap there.
I think that taint discussion will benefit for the work that we are doing in labels, because in that work we will figure it out, all the propagation stories, so how things flow down. And not only, we will add also this capability that things like taint that does not change the machine but change the Kubernetes node will not trigger a rollout. So both capability will be there. But at the same time, I think that we have to think a little bit how to model taint in cluster API, because I don't think that we should shove taint into metadata notation. It will be confusing. I kind of prefer being explicit and having a field, but yeah, we have to think about it. So TLDR, it will benefit by this discussion, but I want to put a taint in the critical path, just because node and labels has its own complexity and size. I will work in parallel. It is orthogonal. It is just another field that will benefit by the same work.
Awesome. Thanks, Fabrizio. I appreciate that. And Jack too. So I guess, like, should we wait until the label stuff has kind of finished, or would it be worthwhile to start working on an enhancement proposal for an API field now, I guess?
I think that we can start discussion where API field, where taint should fit into cluster class, KCP, machine deployment, machine pool, and machine.
Okay. I guess maybe I'll start working on like just a hack MD doc or something that we could share and start discussing, and then we could turn that into enhancement once we have some consensus, if that makes sense.
This will play well with just a couple of YAMLs, not really main words.
Okay, cool. All right, does anyone else have a thought on this? I see Stefan is talking in chat here, says
I can also talk here. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
Just
Go
didn't
ahead.
want to interrupt. Yeah, I was just thinking we have to figure out how that plays into the taint field that we have in kubeadm config template. And I think for taints, it's usually especially important that they are set on node creation as well. So it might be good to have something like, I don't know, if the kubeadm bootstrap controller sees the taint on a machine object, then those taints are also used on Bootstrap already for register with taints, or I don't know, just something like that. We definitely have to think about how those two fields that we then now have to define taints work together.
yeah, I think that's a great point, because yeah, if a user specifies a taint that they expect to be on the node in some sort of, you know, manifest, then yeah, like that might not need to actually be sent to the kubelet or something when it starts to initialize with those. That's a really good point.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm new to this feature, but for the auto scaling, it's only auto scaling the worker nodes, not the control plane nodes. Is that right?
That is correct. Although I'm not, I imagine if you made a machine deployment that covered your control plane nodes and then tried to make the autoscaler scale it, you could probably do that, but I've never tried it out before.
Okay, so but if a user want to auto scale the control plane nodes, and then the labels and the taints should work the same way as worker nodes?
I would expect so, although we don't, you know, we don't have the pathway to properly address these taints from the autoscaler side yet.
Okay.
But I would expect so. I would expect it to treat the machines the same way, regardless of whether they're control plane or not. But that would be the way the user would have to set it up. Stefan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just a question. Can the autoscale the control plane today? Because we're only allowing like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 replicas. Is it aware of that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's not the normal thing.
Yeah, it is. The autoscaler has no special code detection for control plane or master nodes at this point. So like it does not do any sort of awareness about those. So I would expect, and I've never tried this, so I don't know if it would work or not, but if I made a machine deployment that covered my control plane nodes and then pointed the autoscaler at it, like I'm not sure what's happened, because some of the taints that are on the master nodes might cause it to act weird, and it might not be able to like properly cordon or evict from the control plane nodes as well. So like it might try to do something, but it might scale up, but it might not scale down. Jack, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's two things. Typically, the autoscaler has a sort of it targets as a first class input a node pool. So whether it's the cluster autoscaler using the sort of provider-based implementations, like each provider has its own idea of what a node pool might look like, and it's similar for the cluster API provider as well. Is that right? And because the control plane is really in this, I mean, it's sort of more tricky than this, but it's kind of like a different node pool, as distinct from anything you're pointing it to. So you have that, and then plus the standard idiom in Kubernetes is to assign node, like sort of well-known taints to control plane nodes, and for control plane workloads that are supposed to land on those nodes, those get the sort of standard tolerations. So I think you would just have to work really hard to get autoscaler to scale out your control plane, and you really shouldn't do that.
I would expect the same thing, especially when you consider like etcd quorum and whatnot. I mean, we're pretty far off from the original question at this point, but I tend
Yeah,
to agree
well-
with what you're saying. And like,
Autoscaler is just it's based on pending pods, and that's not the correct metric for scaling out or scaling in your control plane. Like
right.
you
Absolutely.
need a metric, a traditional metrics based autoscaling solution for that, which cluster autoscaler was not designed to do so.
Right. And there are probably ways you could get into attaching the HPA to control plane stuff and then trying to get the HPA.
Yeah, don't do that, folks. We're being
Right.
recorded. Don't do that.
Exactly. These are things that you should not try to do. The other thing too is that I know sometimes the control plane nodes can get like a no schedule taint on them. The autoscaler will ignore nodes that have no schedule taint on them. So it won't even include those in the possibility. So essentially we do not recommend using the autoscaler on the control plane. And it would be probably very complicated to set it up. Okay, any other questions, or should we move on to the next topic? And I appreciate the thoughts here. I'll try to put together a document to cover this. Okay, so Stefan, you're up next.
Can you open the PR and then the linked issue there under fixes? Should have linked the issue.
You were a little quiet there, Stefan. Could you say again, please?
Sorry. There is an issue linked in the PR description. If you scroll down, please open that issue. Yeah, here 5, 6, 8. Okay, so I don't know who remembers, but we discussed. Am I loud enough now? Okay, good. I don't know who remembers, but we discussed this like November last year. But I guess I give the full context. So as of today, we have a bunch of resources which are referencing provider resources. Like, I don't know, the clusters referencing a control plane, infrastructure cluster like Docker cluster, the machine deployment as well. Same for KCP, et cetera, et cetera. Those reference resources are all captured by the contract. So it's defined what kind of fields they have, et cetera, et cetera. We currently have code in our controllers, which is looking at all those references in our core resources and try to resolve the corresponding CRD and figures out some detail there, some labels from those CRDs essentially. We currently have an implementation which in the first step just tries to get a CRD by, let's say, guessing the name correctly. And if that doesn't work, we have a fallback, which then just lists all the CRDs that are in the cluster and then tries to figure out in some other, just loops over them essentially to figure out what the right CRD is for a given kind. The plan was to get rid of that fallback behavior because that fallback behavior of listing all CRDs requires memory because we're essentially caching all CRDs in our controller. The plan was to essentially standardize the name of CRDs so that it has zero impact on group and kind. It's just literally the name of the CRD resource. And as a first step, I verified the CRDs of all currently registered providers in ClusterCuddle. So basically all the providers that you can currently install with ClusterCuddle without an additional config. They all have correct CRD names. And now I've opened this PR 7297 to essentially standardize the CRD names. Basically, I'm asking for whoever's interested in that, please take a look, give feedback. Essentially, the idea is to just standardize the names by mentioning it in the contract so that we can then get rid of our fallback and yeah, avoid those memory issues. As mentioned, it shouldn't be a problem for all providers which are currently registered. And in addition to the contract change, there will be a pre-check in ClusterCuddle, which produces a warning essentially, hey, your CRD name doesn't look correct, et cetera, et cetera. And we're not planning to drop the fallback in the next release or something. So for now, it's just updating the contract, adding the ClusterCuddle pre-check, and then waiting for feedback. And then in a future release, you want to drop that fallback. And yeah, that's it. I hope that was somehow understandable. It's a little bit of a complex topic, more details in the issue in the PR.
Yes, I think it was understandable, but I also agree it is a complex topic. So it sounds like providers should really study this to see what the contract change will be so that they can be ready to update their things like in the future, but the fallback will still be in place for the next release. So you don't need to update right away, but you will in the future. Is that
definitely
okay?
Yeah. And if you're working on a provider which is already built in ClusterCuddle, so things like, I don't know, AWS, Azure, 20 others, they are all already verified. The CRD names are all correct, so they don't have to worry. It's just about other providers we're using. If you know you have your, I don't know, built-in provider somewhere in your company internally, I don't know, then it definitely makes sense to take a look here and see if everything matches.
All right, cool. Good warning. And especially to those out there who are running internal cluster API providers, be aware of this. Thanks, Stefan. Okay, Fabrizio, you're up next with a call for papers about the contributor summit.
Yes, so there is the Contributor Summit in the morning of the KubeCon week in Detroit. And basically there is a call for paper for the Contributor Summit. And we have a chance as a project at SIG to propose basically a meeting or special or a talk or a meeting basically to meet all together and discuss. So question number one for this audience is that should we propose a meeting for cluster API project communities and folks interested in to meet together? So basically is asking for getting a room where we can okay, and the second one is that given that we should write a kind of CFP or justification why we want to meet, is there some topic or some argument that folks want to take on in this meeting?
Yeah, it seems like we've had some really cool features, around like cluster class and add-ons, and those things would all be fun to talk about. More selfishly, like I think Fabrizio, when you presented the KubeMark testing stuff to the performance and scale group about a year or so ago, they seemed really interested in that. That might be another topic that would be interesting to the wider Kubernetes community. I guess those are my ideas.
Yeah, thank you. So, Stefan?
I think some stuff related to release team, release cadence, support, etc., etc. Just
that's a good one
for the list. Just to get some opinions. I mean, obviously we can make decisions there, but just to get a feel for what people want and need.
Okay, let me do this. I will open a Slack thread in the channel, trying to understand how many people are going to be there and to collect topics. If we reach critical mass, I'm going to submit a proposal and say, let's see if it gets accepted. Does it sound good?
It sounds good to me. It sounds like it will be very fast moving as well, since, as you noted, we only have until the 30th to submit these. So if you're watching this on recording, come visit the Slack channel. All right, cool. Not seeing any other hands go up. So Fabrizio, you've got the next one.
Yes, so I was in the Kubernetes office just before this meeting, and I had a discussion with Lubomir about basically reviving the work for implementing a TCD learner support. A TCD learner is an interesting feature in a TCD that will basically make a joining member not non-voting until all the data are fully synchronized from the other members, and this is going to probably to add more stability at machine creation. So I think this feature is interesting for Capi. I know that Taros provider now shifted to a TCD learner by default, so I assume that the feature is reached maturity and is ready to use also in Kubernetes. So this is a call for action because Kubernetes team core maintainers is really down to minimum now. If someone is interested in this effort in making it happen, please reach out to the comment on the issue that Mike is showing now, or reach out to me or Lubomir in Slack.
All right. Hopefully we'll get, hopefully we'll get some interest there to keep the numbers up. So that is the end of our regular agenda. So we'll go to provider updates now. We just have one from Capex. Deepak, would you like to read this out?
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. So we just released Capex image builder, and now we can basically build Ubuntu images for to use with Capex as well. And that's all the documentation, all those things updated. And thanks to all those who reviewed the PR. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So for folks looking to do more work with the Nutanix provider, now you've got more images. All right. So we've reached the end of our regular meeting. Give a chance for people to raise their hand for any ad hoc topics, or we will take back about 20 minutes of our day here. So give folks a minute. I'm not seeing any hands going up. So thank you everyone for coming out, and I guess we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Mike.